Time now for What the Farage. And Brexiteers were left beaming this weekend as headlines suggested PM Rishi Sunak would consider pulling out of the European Convention on Human Rights if Strasbourg courts prevented him delivering his fifth pledge to stop the boats, which inevitably they will. But just 24 hours later, the Times newspaper exposed the whole ploy as nothing more than a political ruse to throw the Tory right wing some red meat ahead of finalising a customs deal on Northern Ireland. So, with Fishy Rishi's commitment to the ECHR looking as solid as ever now, is Nigel Farage right to say that the British public now deserve a referendum on leaving? Nigel, I mean, that was an extraordinary 48 hours, wasn't it? The Sunday Times says, Rishi wants us to go. The Times on the Money says, oh, no. This was just to appease the European Research Group.
Well, I mean, look at the immediate reaction. I mean, within hours of that being published, that we might consider putting in our next manifesto, leaving ECHR. I mean, the massed ranks of the Conservative Party said, oh, my goodness me, you can't do this. This is dreadful. ECHR is the new Brexit. The attitude towards ECHR within the Tory Party is the same as it was 10 years ago. If anyone dared utter, we should leave the European Union. It was a totally inconsistent, insincere comment made by Sunak. And please, folks, don't believe a word of it. It simply isn't going to happen. And even if it did, it'll be yet another manifesto lie. And they've been doing it since 2010. 2010 manifesto will reduce net migration tens of thousands a year. They said it in 2015. They said it in 2017. Those general elections. And in 2019, vote for us and take back control of your borders. As I speak, dinghies are massing on the beaches of Dunkirk. I mean, at every election, they lie to you and say, but Labour are worse. Sorry, none of it's good enough.
The thing is, Nigel, right, it's insane for anyone in the Conservative Party to think that a manifesto pledge is appropriate or enough in this case. We can't wait for this to be a fight at the next election. We've got to leave the ECHR now.
Well, the point is, we cannot deport people because of ECHR. Abu Qatada, a blooming terrorist, took us 10 years to get rid of him. And anybody can claim, Articles 2, 3, Article 8, the right to a family life. I've got a cat, you can't deport me. My third cousin's just had a baby. I mean, it literally is impossible. That plane did not go to Rwanda that night because of a judge there in the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. If you want to take back control of your borders, if you want to be a sovereign nation, if you want a proper Brexit, you have to leave ECHR.
Now, look, Nigel, from the sublime to the ridiculous, but I think I was actually equally angry about this one. So have you heard about it, Nigel? Tom Jones, right, coming under really increasing pressure from the usual woke mob to knock Delilah off his set list altogether because apparently the lyrics celebrate domestic violence. Now, the Welsh Rugby Union has already actually banned the song, but thank God Tom, at this point, refusing to budge and saying that he will play the song at Cardiff Castle. But can you believe, Nigel, that cancel culture is now permeating actually songs that transcend what their lyrical content is?
Yeah. Well, it'll be Shakespeare next, won't it?
Well, it's already happening, isn't it? Well,
I mean, Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet. I mean, clearly, it'll begin by being amended and then be completely banned. And all of this in a country where the Church of England, our established church, is considering removing Our Father, and it'll become they or them.
It's lunacy.
But it is. But you know something? I just get a feeling that it maybe has to get worse before it gets better. And when you look at what's happening in Scotland, with that very irresponsible, dangerous piece of legislation Sturgeon put through, there is now a backlash against it, and it's real, and it's happening, and it's affecting not just her personal polls, but even the polls for Scottish separation. So there does come a moment at which that pendulum swings back, at which people get on board and say, this is madness. And of course, they'll say, we knew it all along. Although they wouldn't have had the courage to speak out and say it. And this is where, actually, this is important. This is where GB News, I think, is playing a very important role in our national public life, because we're daring to call out these things. Now, that doesn't mean we'll get everything right, but it does mean on some of these fundamentally important issues where people know in their hearts what is going on is wrong, but dare not speak the truth. Well, we do dare to speak the truth. And I think on all of these things, I'm becoming more optimistic of a swing back of that pendulum. I really am.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think it's a good moment, given you mentioned GB News, Nigel, because we've been dealing with quite a lot of incoming over the past few days. And I think it is really important to point out the reason that we are forced, not by choice, by the way, to work in a regulatory environment is because we want people to watch us. We want to have a wide audience. We want to be available on terrestrial TV. And by signing up to that, we have to sign up to government regulation via this body called Ofcom. And we've never denied that, have we? There is a cost, of course, to signing up to that, but that's what you have to do in this country. Personally, I wish Ofcom didn't exist at all. It doesn't exist in the US, and they have a much better media system as a result. But in the UK, if you want to be on television, that's what you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, look, in a minute, I'm doing Fox News America, where they don't have to provide any balance to the arguments at all. But I'll tell you this, actually, I'm not vexed by Ofcom at all. I've worked with far worse regulators, namely the European Parliament and the Financial Conduct Authority, than I have with Ofcom. And frankly, Dan, it's not difficult, because actually we want to treat our viewers and listeners with intelligence too. And I very often on my show, will show both sides of an argument, both sides of a debate, and say to people at home, we at GB News think you are big enough and ugly enough to make up, if that itself is not a cancellation comment, you're big enough and ugly enough to make up your own minds on these things. So, yeah, there has been a lot of furore about Ofcom and GB News the last couple of days. Truth is, we actually want our viewers and our listeners to hear both sides of an argument, whilst we ourselves are free to give our own opinions. I haven't got a problem with any of that.
No, indeed. And of course, at the top of your show tonight, you had a debate that no one in the British media is having, which is that actually, can we keep on going with this war in Ukraine in perpetuity? Is that the right thing? And you won't see that debated, actually, on the BBC, or on Sky News, on ITV News. You will literally not see that debate. And of course, on this show, as you know, I've been very passionate about highlighting the horrific treatment of the vaccine injured in this country. And I'm very passionate about that, and I will continue to do so. And yes, we have to do so within the regulatory framework, which means we give both sides of the argument, and that's how it works. Yeah, and it works incredibly well. And I must say also, Boris Johnson is suggesting that we send every single fighter jet we own to Ukraine. And on no other news channel is the lunacy of this position even being commented on. So, we dare to break the boundaries of thought and debate and free speech. We do it in a balanced and grown-up way. And you know what? We've been around now for just over 18 months. And I do think that a GB News brand is now being established in this country. I think it's good for plurality of media. I think it's good for public debate. And I think our influence is growing. And look, all right, maybe I'm just doing a promotion for the channel, but I generally mean, I'm somebody that has fought media for a couple of decades for daring to break the orthodoxy on borders, on EU membership. Now, I know what it's like to fight the media who are all of one mind on everything. And we are beginning to break that up, and we should be very proud of ourselves. No, I totally agree. Without GB News, I don't think the small boats crisis, in large part because of you, Nigel, would be at the top of the news agenda. Certainly, the BBC would not be covering the trans extremism in Scotland. They knew they couldn't avoid it because of the focus that GB News has had on this issue. And likewise, the vaccine injured. They do not get a voice at all on any other channel in the British media, and that will not change. Nigel, thank you so much. Great to chat. Coming up.